Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Council Committee on Equal Opportunities to order. This meeting is being live streamed to YouTube for the general public. So all of the audio and video is being captured and recorded. And in order to participate in the meeting, your video must be turned on. When you're not an active speaker, please ensure your microphone is muted so there isn't any background noise. If you do need to speak, please raise your hand so I can call on you before you unmute. However, I can't necessarily see everyone, so if I don't see you and recognize you, you can just unmute and announce that you'd like to make a comment. Does anyone have any questions? First item of order is to have Dr. Offit call the roll.
Yes. So for the CEO roll call for the June 27th, 2022 meeting, Whitney Allen, Colby Burks, Rochelle Brown,
Present.
David Carpenter,
Here.
Robert Croft,
Here.
Kelly Ellis,
Present.
Myra Gomez,
Present.
Letitia Robertson, Elaine Walker.
Here. And I'd like to recognize Myra Gomez for her first meeting and welcome her to this committee. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you all too.
Travis Powell, who is CPE's Vice President and General Counsel, will provide updates from the most recent board meeting. Travis?
Thanks, Chair Walker. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everyone. Hopefully we can do one of these in person here before too long. That would be great. We had a fantastic CPE meeting. I'll just hit a few of the highlights and give a brief summary of what Dr. Thompson's president's report that he provided to the council. He sends his hellos, wished he could be here today, but other matters kept him away. But I'll pitch in for him as best as I can. So the first item I'll mention is we've had these are good problems to have. We've actually received quite a bit of funding in the most recent budget cycle, and as part of that, we've had to develop different work groups and strategies in order to distribute those funds. And one of those groups of funding is we received $10 million for a healthcare initiative. So we've created a healthcare workforce collaborative advisory group to help determine how that $10 million appropriation will be distributed amongst our campuses in order to promote the healthcare workforce growth in our state. So we've hired some staff to help lead this initiative, and then the group had its first meeting last week, actually. So working on different ways to promote healthcare workforce initiatives across our campuses. Really excited to get this funding. I think it can be used for a lot of different things on campuses to get more nurses and healthcare providers out into the system as quickly as possible, because we know what a shortage we have, particularly in our rural areas. CPE also received $80 million in new funding each year in the upcoming biennium in the Post-Secondary Education Performance Fund. So we will work on ways to talk about how to distribute those funds. The funding distribution model is outlined in statute, but we will be convening the post-secondary education work group in 2023 which is a group that meets every 3 years to look at different ways that the funding model is working or not working, in different ways that we might distribute those funds and make any recommendations to the General Assembly about how the model might need to be adjusted. We also, and I personally have been spending a lot of my time on Kentucky State University. Most of you all are probably aware through House Bill 250, Kentucky State University received $23 million to help facilitate the current year reduction, or the current year, deficit that they had in their budget of $23 million. We distributed the first set of those funding in April, and then we distributed the last amount, or will be distributed. The board approved the last distribution at its last meeting on June 17th. Actually, Kentucky State University's board is
Travis,
meeting right now. Yes.
I just wanted to know that 23 million is repayable at this point, correct?
That's correct. So in 2020, I think beginning in 2025, we will make a recommendation on how those funds shall be paid back. It is a loan, but it's a non-interest bearing loan. And the repayment provisions do not start until 25, 26, that fiscal year. So, and actually CP has the authority to determine or to make recommendations on how those funds shall be repaid. And the General Assembly will, of course, can adopt those or come up with their own, but it is a loan, but it doesn't have to be repaid for another at least 3 years. And then again, we can determine at that time or we don't get to necessarily determine, but we can make recommendations on how it should be repaid. Those fundings will have been distributed, and they've all been approved and will be distributed. KSU's actually board's meeting right now. They adopted a budget for the next fiscal year, a balanced budget, which is a very positive and thing that they were able to do this year. We were not operating on a balanced budget before, and so this coming year we'll have things in place to make sure that they operate within the budget. They're also in the process, and I think they're deliberating right now. I haven't checked in. They're in closed session on making a selection for a new interim president that will start hopefully effective July 1. That was one of the requirements of House Bill 250 is that they hire a new interim president. That interim president will serve until at least April of next year. And then at that time, if KSU board chooses to do so, they can seek to hire a permanent president, but must have a new interim president in place at least until April of next year. And so that announcement should be made today. So that's very exciting. We've are meeting our reporting requirements. We were required to report on our management and improvement plan development on June 1st, and we provided that report to the General Assembly and the governor's office. We're also required to provide a monthly financial report of KSU's current finances, and that the May report was submitted last week. So we're meeting our reporting requirements. We also hired Dr. Stephanie Mayberry. She was introduced to our board last week as our senior director for KSU relations. So she'll be our main in-person staff member on KSU's campus most every day, helping to first develop the management and improvement plan, and then helping to help KSU to implement that plan moving forward until 2025 when the plan report is due. CP has also launched a series of podcasts called Higher Education Matters. We've got 2 podcasts released. We've got some others in the can. We encourage you all to, if you search for Higher Education Matters and CP on anywhere you get your podcast, you should be able to see those. Our very own Dawn Offit was one of the first guests on the podcast, so I definitely encourage you to listen to that one. So they're about an hour long, and really will hit on a lot of the work that this committee's doing. So please check that out. I'll mention too, we selected our fourth cadre of our Academic Leadership Development Institute program, which prepares minority faculty and staff members for leadership roles in Kentucky higher education institutions. They had their first meeting at our Student Success Conference back in April, and from all accounts, it's a great group of folks, really highly engaged group of individuals. Super excited to be in person and meeting again. We've continued these cohorts in the last couple of years. Of course, with COVID, we had to do those mostly through Zoom, and these are really groups that need to be in person, networking and getting to know each other and creating those relationships between each other and learning together about ways to advance in their career. So we're excited to have that group together again, and looking forward to hopefully having a presentation out to you all towards the end of their program to talk a little bit about what they're doing and give you a little more information on that, and maybe even meet some of these folks. I think that would be great and something you all would enjoy. A couple other items I'll mention. I mentioned funding too. We at its last meeting, CPE approved its asset. We received funding for a capital asset preservation and for an endowment match program. And so we adopted the guidelines for both of those. We also received some money for workforce development at the community college level to invest in some of those programs there. So we approved the guidelines for all three of those funding pools. Also, I'll note too, while this money did not get appropriated to CPE, the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority was required to consult with CPE on distribution of $10 million of scholarships for undergraduate students or foreign nationals that have either received asylum or are seeking asylum here in Kentucky, and then to also promote exchange programs as well. So we're really excited about being able to help better serve those displaced individuals that come into Kentucky and get them to progress at either our community colleges or our four-year institutions. So that's an exciting new program that we received funding for. We also reported out on the action that you all, or not action you all took, but the report that you all received at your last meeting with regard to the report about the annual DEI report evaluation score. So we reported that out to the board as well. And I think Dawn's going to update you on that later. We got some good questions from our board members and a very good discussion about that process. Our board is very engaged in the work that you all are doing and very interested in the work that this board's doing. So that was really good to hear. And so we gave that report out, and Dawn gave an excellent overview of the process for evaluation, which is new to a lot of our members. We have a lot of new members on our board, so I was really glad that you had the opportunity to explain this process to them. But that's really all I have, Dawn and Chair Walker. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Travis, I have a quick question. Can you
sure.
Go back and talk again? Do you have any details or information about, you had talked about the International Support Exchange Program?
So it's a scholarship program for displaced individuals, refugees from various, that are seeking asylum here in Kentucky. And so I can send her, I think the guidelines have been sent around. We sent it around to our campuses. Each campus will receive, we came up with a funding distribution model. Each campus will, based on the size of our campuses, and each campus will have access to a pool of funds to use for scholarships to help pay the cost of attendance for those individuals that are seeking asylum and attempting to further their post-secondary education.
And what's the exchange program you mentioned?
Oh, there's a little money in there too for exchange programs. For example, with Taiwan, we entered into a memorandum of agreement back in the first of the year with just to sort of better promote exchange programs with Taiwan. So that wouldn't just be limited to them, but that's just one example. So programs where we send folks to other countries and they send to go to complete their post-secondary education, and other countries send their students here.
So it's like college students here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's given college students here an opportunity to visit other countries or to
study.
study
So it's basically like study abroad programs. I mean, it could include other items as well, but that's one example. And then also too, as an exchange, it would also be able to send students from those countries to institutions in Kentucky as well, so that they can go here for whether it be a semester or a year, something like that.
And who's coordinating that efforts?
It would be, so the money flows out of KIA. Each individual campus would have their own designee to sort of coordinate those items. Now the coordination from our end usually comes out of our academic affairs unit. So Dr. Melissa Bell, our provost, usually out of her shop usually manages those. And we have had some meetings with the folks from Taiwan. That was just one, like I said, that's just one example that they sought to enter into a formal arrangement with Kentucky just to better promote opportunities there. And so we've done that. We participated in a few meetings with different folks that they've asked us to in Taiwan just to talk about the opportunities here in Kentucky. So
Is the basics of that sounds like for workforce development?
It could be, ultimately, I think it's, the funding was put in the budget. I'm not sure. We never really know exactly, why or where, sometimes where the reasoning behind it, but this was amount of money that was put into the budget bill for this purpose. But this is mainly just at the post-secondary level. But I mean, I would hope that, potentially could lead to workforce development, if students come, for example, students from another country come here, go to school, they like it here, they can seek to stay. There's some visa opportunities that they could enter into so they could stay and work beyond their education. So we hope that happens. We love to always, bring good folks in and keep them here in Kentucky. So
Does this count also towards potentially their diversity plans of recruiting more diverse?
Yes, it could in the sense of enrollment diversity. So, if, and we've had institutions talk about in their narratives, we don't necessarily count international students and we don't set targets for those, but we ask institutions to tell us about other types of diversity other than the racial diversity that we capture through our data collections. And many of those talk about the international students on their campus and international programs. So yeah, absolutely. It would contribute to enrollment diversity.
Good. No, I'm just interested in the HOPE project. So if there's anything that
Yeah.
as a committee or whatnot I could do or get involved with,
Well, I
I'd love to know
appreciate
more.
that. This is all brand new to us. So we're continuing to monitor it and work with Kia on this funding amount. And I mean, I think getting some feedback on, and creating an advisory group, I think could be very helpful. So I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah. And of course I represent the Japanese side in my professional world, and a lot of the universities already have an existing program with Japan, especially like UK, the pharmacy school, the medical school, Western, those already kind of have something that's in place that we support and provide services to. So, we might be able to provide information or whatnot.
Okay.
In regards not just Japan, but other countries. Yeah.
Sure. I will distribute to the group here the details on the program, and welcome to look at that. And if you have any more questions or have any ideas on the way to help, let us know. But yeah, I'll get those around. I'll make sure those get distributed to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Travis.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Travis? Thank you very much for that report. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
The next item is approval of minutes. If everyone will make sure that your video and audio is on, if all of our members, and I also like to welcome Dr. Robertson to the meeting. The minutes were provided for in your meeting materials. Is there a motion to approve the minutes and a second? Oh, I also want to welcome Whitney Allen to the meeting. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Robert Croft. Second was,
Whitney Allen.
I didn't. Second by Whitney Allen. All those in
Yes, ma'am.
favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
If you
Aye.
could make sure you're unmuted.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign? Those minutes are approved. Thank you. We have an annual DE to present the final scores from this year's reports. And this is a follow-up to the April meeting because Murray State University's score was pending.
Correct. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and just, again, this is a follow-up. We had the in-depth meeting, and so these are the final scores that were presented to the CPE board a couple of weeks ago. So here are the final scores for our four-year institutions. You'll see that if you recall that for four-year institutions, you have to have a minimum score of 24 out of 36 in order to be automatically eligible to apply for a new academic program approval in the upcoming academic year. And so you had all the scores previously. We want to report now that Murray State received a 22 out of the 36 for their final score. And then this also gives you in one comprehensive look, all of the quantitative scores and the qualitative scores remember you had for your quantitative scores, 2s meant that you met or exceeded your annual target, 1s that you were above your baseline but below your annual target, and 0s that you were below the 2015-2016 baseline. And then for your qualitative section, the section below, as you reviewed narratives, 2 meant that they were making, that they had met or exceeded their goals, 1 that they were making progress toward their goals, or 0 that they were not making progress to the goals. So this is your final scores for your 4-year institutions. And then, as you already know, for your 2-year institutions, you have the scores listed there, the same criteria in terms of your 2, 1, 0 scoring guides apply, and you have your comprehensive look at all of the institutions on one page, as you can look to see where your scores are. And for your KCTCS institutions, you have to have a 22 minimum score out of 34 for them to be automatically eligible to apply for a new academic program approval for the upcoming year. And so as you look at the scores, the following institutions did not meet the minimum required score, be it a 24 or a 22, and that is Henderson Community College, Hopkinsville Community College, Murray State University, and Southeast Community and Technical College. And so those institutions that did not meet the minimum required score will be sent information about how they can request a waiver. And in that waiver request, there will be detailed information on submitting an improvement plan in order for them to be able to request that waiver to apply for a new academic program approval in the upcoming year. And that information will be sent out to these 4 institutions by July 1st of 2022. And so what would happen then is if those institutions so chose to then develop an improvement plan to implement, they would develop the plan working with CPE to ensure that they collect the document, and then that would be put on the October 2022 CEO meeting agenda for you all to then approve. So our next steps here would be to, again, get the information out about the performance improvement plan for those institutions. And just so that you all would know, again, they would be on the October meeting because it has to be approved. And so that way we want to get this information out early so they have time to develop the improvement plan and get it so that they can submit it in as much of a timely fashion as possible. Additionally, what we want to do in our DEI unit at CPE is to continue to identify high impact practices in the areas of opportunity, success, and impact. We know that this process is a continuous improvement process, and we want to be able to, 1, identify what high impact practices are, and then 2, see what they are, of course, around the notions of enrollment for students, retention for students, student success, campus climate, those kinds of things. And then we want to be able to look, since this is our 4th iteration of our policy review, our evaluation review, we want to be able to look at the different narratives that include the strategies for the institutions and be able to analyze what was written in those narratives. We also want to make sure that we are able to couple that with analyzing the metrics and the quantitative data to see which institutions are meeting and exceeding their goals, and then be able to say, well, this institution has been, over the past 2 or 3 iterations of their report, they have met or exceeded their goal. And here is the strategy that they're using to be able to do that. And so then we want to be able to share that with other institutions to be able to have this kind of best practice conversation as institutions have asked us, could we share information? So we're going to be able to do that in the next couple of months. This particular report represents the end of this first cycle, in that we were initially looking through the dates of 2020 to 2021. And so institutions are already in the process of continuing the work and identifying targets for the next 3 years. So we're in conversations and negotiations with institutions to identify their data, their quantitative metrics, so that we can see what we're looking at in over the next 3 years, and then making any types of adjustments to their plans as needed. One of the things that we learned as a lesson learned, if you will, that came out of the report writing is that we wanted to ensure that we are able to offer as best possible some insight into how you as committee members review the reports. And so we've had questions from our writers as to, what are the teams looking for, so that they can write their qualitative narrative portion as best as they can. So we want to develop some trainings for them. And if you all have specific feedback or things that you would like to share other than what has been submitted on the actual report, then please let me know, because we want to make sure that we are able to help the institutions, as they're writing, to know what you are specifically looking for. As I know that you've shared some examples, and we've had some conversations with those individuals who did not meet the minimum required score, but this is information that would be good for anybody, particularly as we know that there has been some staff changes and some staff turnover, and then someone new comes in, and they're trying to figure out how to write the report and what's being looked at. So if we could record something and give them something that they can refer to later, that's what we want to do. And then at the end of the day, as we end one cycle, that just means we are at the time period where we are starting to look at the next cycle. So we're preparing for our reporting process for 2021 and 2022 as it begins in this next academic year, beginning July 1. So just those are the things I wanted to share. And I know that there are some questions or comments in the chat, so I'll stop sharing and take a look at those. That's a good idea. And I think Jessica, Travis put some information in there. Okay. So are there any questions that you all have about what I shared?
Dr. Offit, I just want to thank you for taking what can be a very complex subject and really present in a very knowledgeable and straightforward process. And as I'm listening to this, if anyone has any question as to the importance of this committee or the importance of this process, the understanding that those institutions that did not meet minimum standards are not allowed to get approval for any new academic programs is a rather startling realization. And so it shows that the work that we do, the analysis that we do is important. And I'm pleased everyone takes it very seriously. And so I want to thank you very much.
Yes, again, thank you so very much. And again, if you have specifics, I know some questions that we had were, well, what is the review team looking for? We answer this question, and if they didn't score, if they didn't get a perfect 2, for example, they'd want to know what they could do to improve. And so if there's some things that you remember that could help us in terms of the trainings that we developed, just as you saw some things, please share that with us. That'd be great.
Thank you very much. I did want to mention, we originally thought that there may be a revision approval, strategy revision approval presentation by Somerset Community College, but that will be handled at our October meeting. Is there anything else for Dr. Offit on this subject or any other items to discuss? I would like to welcome Dr. Molly Kirby, and I'm going to see if I've got her on my screen. There she is, good friend Dr. Molly Kirby from right up the hill, Western. She's going to join us today to talk about the Cultural Competence Credential Certification Program at Western Kentucky University. And if you could please, if you could also introduce your colleagues, Dr. Kirby.
I'm sorry, you're freezing on my side.
I just wanted to thank here. Also, if you could introduce your colleagues.
Oh, I'm by myself.
So Molly, before you get started,
okay.
If you don't mind, I wanted to just give a brief overview of the Cultural Competence Certification process, because we have at least one new CEO member, Myra Gomez, and I'm not sure specifically if we had the time frame to actually introduce this process when Kelly Ellis and Elaine actually came on. So I just want to give a quick 5-minute overview, and then I'll toss it to you if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
Okay. And if you don't mind, Chair Walker, let me just say that as the chair, if you don't mind me doing that.
Not at all. That is welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen and then just give a brief overview just to kind of set the stage as to the work that has gone into this and what we're talking about in terms of this notion of cultural competency credential certification and why we have it and what it is. So here's our rationale. If you look at our 2016 policy that we're working under, it identifies the creation of a cultural competency certificate program as a strategy an institution can use to implement in order to meet this goal. And one of the things that we've often wanted to do is make sure that we support our institutions in any way that we can. So we, to make a long story short, we asked the question to our diversity reps, if you are graduating students saying that they're culturally competent, and if we're saying that our faculty and staff members are culturally competent, how do we know? What are we looking for? What are the minimum required competencies that you would want them to demonstrate? So we sought feedback from our 2- and 4-year institutions, both faculty and staff, to be able to have them identify, and Dr. Kirby was one of the individuals working with us to identify what these minimum competencies might look like. And so based on the information that came from that, we started to think about how we could implement this statewide so that there would be some portability with the program, the certification in and of itself, so that if someone transfers, a student transfers from one institution to another, or if anybody, any business owner or industry professional is hiring one of our students, and we're saying that that student is culturally competent, there would be some minimum standards that someone can look up and say, okay, by hiring this student who has gone through a program that is certified by the state, I know that this student has this cultural awareness and can demonstrate X, Y, and Z. So we were looking at it that way. But then as we started to have this conversation, we knew that we couldn't start necessarily with the students without having to work with the faculty and staff. And so we were able to realize that both that the demonstration of the competencies didn't change, whether it was students or faculty and staff, but of course, administering a program or develop a program would certainly look different. And so the benefits to having this type of certification is that we have a cultural competence advisory committee, a third-party committee that does this verification, so it doesn't come through us. Again, I talked about the consistency and the portability of it. And then it positions Kentucky as a leader in cultural competence. As I've shared this work and I've talked to other individuals in other states, they are really excited about the work that we're doing because they always talk about how they've not heard of anything like this before. So the process is that if anyone, an institution has a program, be it for students, faculty, or staff, they have to submit a proposal showing that it aligns with our foundational work, which is the 8 of the 4th model of cultural competence. And they must show that while they have the flexibility to either use an existing program or to create one of their own, they just must show the alignment. And the Cultural Competence Advisory Committee reviews it to suggest recommendations for approval. And then the final approval, once the decisions are made, we take that in front of the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee. So for students, what we're looking for in terms of credentialing a program would be that it would be able to show that it connects with the first 2 components of the 8 of the 4th model, which are awareness and acknowledgement, and that students would need to have the equivalent of content enough where it would be equivalent to 6 credit hours in their program. And it has to be a prerequisite for the other 2 parts of the 8 of the 4th certification, 8 of the 4th model, which is acceptance and action. And so that would also be another 6 hours of credit. So students could potentially come away with a program with 12 hours of 12 hours of content in cultural competence. And again, institutions don't have to create an entire program. They can demonstrate that if a student takes certain courses that are already existing by submitting copies of syllabi, they can show how they're aligning with the 8 of the 4th model for cultural competence. Then they can demonstrate the connections with those, and students can take those courses and then ultimately have what we're looking for. In addition, institutions can also look at programs for faculty and staff. And we're saying that they have to have a minimum of 8 professional development hours. They have to also be aligned with the 8 of the 4th model. We've had some professional development that we've done at CPE ourselves, and that they can avail themselves of when we do those at the Higher Equity Symposiums annually, or they can do their own. And so what we have here is Dr. Molly Kirby, who at Western Kentucky University, who has done their own, because we got certified by the CPE board. We got the approval process. We launched it in November of 2021, and then Western Kentucky University has had the first approved program. So I just wanted to give that kind of background before we toss it over to Dr. Kirby so that she can share with us how it has gone, because they implemented it this past spring. So thank you for indulging me a little bit. So Dr. Kirby, I'm going to throw it over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. I know a lot of you all saw the presentation that we did. I don't even remember the last time you all met. I believe we showed, Marko Jumancic came and we showed you the actual modules that we created. Just to give you a little bit of an update about how we did this, we had 6 diversity, equity, inclusion fellows that were part of our Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. And we came up with the idea to use those fellows to develop this program for us. So they developed 4 modules, and each one of them is about 8 hours a piece. So ours was pretty extensive. They were, I'm going to try to do so the first one was integrative inclusivity and course setup. The second was course and classroom climate. The third was teaching with transparency. And the very last one was grading for equity. So what we did was take the A4 model and integrate it into that, into those 4 models. Now, each one of them weren't just down the line. So it wasn't just awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, and action. We kind of weaved them together so that they would reinforce each other. And we kind of theoretically bound these into cultural responsiveness, equity mindedness, and inclusive excellence. I just gave, as a matter of fact, just as an aside, I just did a workshop at the Civic Leadership and Democratic Engagement Conference, and I did an entire workshop on how we took the A4 model from the state of Kentucky and, you know, gave the CPE all the credit and everything about developing this and how we did this to make it a statewide effort rather than just something that was unique to each university, and then how we took our efforts and plugged it in. And so IUPUI is really interested. So Indiana might be knocking on your door to ask questions about how we did this. So they were really interested, and the fact that we're trying to assess it as well. So basically what we did is they got the modules together, and that took some time, and it's a real pretty, you know, I showed you all some of the things. It's really pretty. We used Blackboard, integrated it in. Some of it was synchronous. So every once in a while they would meet on Zoom or face-to-face. I think a couple of them did. The rest of it was asynchronistic, and you kind of went through the self-reflective process as you went through each one of them. So kind of what happened is that everybody came in with a syllabus and how they were teaching the course that had their assignments and all that sort of thing in it. At the end of the program, everybody was asked to redesign an inclusive teaching syllabus. So they're rubricing out those right now and doing data analysis. So they're going to look at the original that came through, look at the one that was done at the end, and see how the things improved over the thing. So a lot of what we do when we do assessment of DEI efforts, which is it's hard to assess these things a lot of times, even if it's just, you know, over time or if it's a one-time thing. But if you use a theory of planned behavior, and that's kind of how we base our assessment. So you've got your syllabus coming into the ITA, and then at the very end of it, what do you plan to teach? How does that look differently? So we know that a lot of times intention to, it's like voter registration. Probably Elaine Walker knows this too, is that if you can get people to change their intention to do something, they're more than likely to actually do it. So that's always been one of our things, is how does the, what are your intentions to do so? And if you are going to do it at the end. So we did it that way. Within these two, there were reflective exercises. So, somebody could look at their grading for equity, say at the end, and that person who was doing that module could give them feedback and say, this is a really good way of doing this, but have you thought that? So there was feedback all the way through all of this process. And at the very end of it, we started in January. Let me back up just a second. So we actually did an application process. So people had to apply to become a part of the Inclusive Teaching Academy. We took 3 people from each of the 5 colleges to start with. So we had 15 people in our first cohort. There was a pretty extensive, why do you want to do this? What are you doing? What's your interest in this? And we took people who really had, who really wanted to change the way they were doing things. So it was sort of a pilot in a sense. We proposed it in November. We got approved in November. We proposed it to the state in October because we wanted to get this going in January. So we started in January. We went through January to about the middle of April with all these modules. So everybody got their hours in, and we had our first cohort graduate the 1st of May. So on top of this, I emailed Donna. So what are we going to do about micro-credentialing process? And she's like, you on your own. I was like, okay. So we ended up, as a result of this, also starting a micro-credentialing program at WKU that's not tied to academics. So people can go, so we have another DEI initiative in the business college. So they're training people in businesses and industry here in the well, probably in our local, I would say in Bowling Green, but I think some of it spans out to Franklin, some of the other places. So you can get a micro-credentialed in DEI workplace now through the business college. And for a nominal fee, I think they're charging like $40 for the class. So that gives a stipend to the instructor and the $5 for the badge. So we actually have a process now for giving badges. So the next part of this is that we, like Dawn said, we did faculty first because they were the easiest group for me to get my head around. The second group we're doing, and hopefully we'll have that to bring to you sometime next month, Dawn, is that we've developed one that's mirrored of that for the staff. So it'll be a workplace inclusive academy. So, or I think it's Workplace Inclusivity Academy is what it's called. So we'll kind of do the process, people can apply. And our idea is now that these people who have been trained can go train again. So we can do some of these things. And we're also trying to find a sustainability plan because somebody's going to have to update this material as we go. So it's kind of an ongoing process. We also have a diversity, equity, and inclusion fellow here in the provost office that's working on it for students. The students are a little bit more difficult. So our hope is that it maybe by next year we'll have that all in place, and then we can launch it in fall of 2023. Because you've got course credit you have to deal with the registrar's office, you have to register, deal with putting that together. We're going to have to talk with KCTCS a little bit so that we can have learning outcomes that are similar. So that if somebody transfers into WKU and they've already done those 2 that Dawn was talking about, those first 6 hours, what would it look like to take the second 6 hours at WKU? But we actually have a person who's working on that solely, and that's her responsibility right now. She's a faculty member in School of Teacher Ed, so she kind of knows how to put these things together and how that'll look. So hopefully we'll have all 3 of these programs running. I actually tried to do this and do everybody together with faculty and staff, and it didn't work quite as well as I thought it was going to, because people have different needs. And one of the things I think that's really important is making sure that you have an inclusive classroom, because until we build that inclusive classroom, trying to build cultural competence with our students is almost impossible. So my hope is that all the people that graduated from the Inclusive Teaching Academy this year, we have 3 people in each college now trained, that they can create something within their colleges so we can start growing this more exponentially as it goes. And then our office will manage to make sure they stay in with the A4 model, make sure their micro-credentials match, make sure that everybody knows what's going on so that we don't have, people just doing fringe things out here, but it's all coordinated through and built into the state. I think that's all I have. I would love to entertain questions if anybody has any questions or suggestions for how we might not be just random about all of this. We tried to really think through and make sure that we had, a pathway through with everything. The people, I will say that we have a new provost whom I really like a lot. And he was really supportive of this. And he went and sat in on one of the ITA, one of the Inclusive Teaching Academy sessions that they had. Because like I said, some of them were synchronous and some of it's asynchronous. So we did it online and face-to-face as well. And he said that's one of the best things that he ever sat in on in his career. And it was just from taking a collaborative bunch of people. I have this one thing when I started my presentation, it's like the best ideas are ones that can't be traced back to an individual. So, it kind of started with Aaron's idea for the A4, the CPE, and how all of these things just kind of flowed together. And then we had these 6 people that did modules. And then we had the micro-credentialing. So we got all the people running in the background trying to figure out the structure of getting a micro-credential that says, I'm culturally competent, says the state of Kentucky, because this all lined up. So it really took a lot of people to make it happen on our campus. And now I'm really
Molly, I just wanted to ask, what has been the response of the professors and the administration to this program?
It's been really, we just got out of a meeting, and it's really hard sometimes because those ebbs and flows with things about how diversity, equity, inclusion is received on your campus. So, with this, I will just say we went to the cheerleaders. We went to people who were at that point where they were really interested in knowing how to change what they did. And that's a real hard one with faculty. When you ask them to change something in the classroom, you would think that you were asking them to move a boulder uphill, or, you don't want to, it's my academic freedom to do it the way I want to do it. What I always say is like, here's your goal at the end. How you get there is up to you. So this academy was about helping you get there. And a lot of people aren't really on board with that, but we had a really good response to that. And our administration and our leadership is really good. So we don't, I rarely hit any kind of animosity from that level. Trying to move faculty sometime, and we're a pretty large institution, is a little harder. But I think and the person that led this today for us said something that I think is so true, is that whenever you take those 15 people and those 15 or 3 people for each college go back into their college and start talking about what they do, it infects other people, and then they get interested in what they want to do. So we're kind of working on the contagion theory here, and we hope that this work and what we're doing is contagious. And I think, I just call it kind of grows exponentially, but it does. So there were other people that were interested, and there wasn't room for them this time. So we'll do another one in the spring. But hopefully what the provost kind of was talking about is that we could do brown bag lunches to get people excited about applying in the fall. This is what we did, and here's some examples of exercises you can do in your classroom, and it'll excite people to apply, and we'll get a whole new group. So we'll have it at the university level. We'll keep, I guess, train the trainer kind of way is a good way to look at it, and then everybody can take it into their colleges. Hopefully the same thing will happen with staff. We're hoping we can start a cohort this year with the staff, and then the next year with the students. We're kind of trying to build it a little bit at a time. It's like juggling. You start with one ball, throwing it up. If you can catch it, you're doing good. You get another one in there and start catching them, then you've got more to look at. So the hard part's getting all 3 of them together and making it work. But hopefully we'll be there by the fall of 2023. That's the plan anyway.
Other questions for Molly?
Yeah, I just have a quick question or just a comment.
Yes.
Well, one, congratulations. That's exciting.
you.
It sounds like a lot of hard work is done in the place, and you guys always continue to amaze me on some of the diversity efforts and things that you guys do. So when you talked about you had different colleges that applied for the program, are the colleges looking at implementing a cultural related class that gives the students more exposure to different cultures within the US or outside the US? Or is this kind of looking at the modern language classes, of implementing new programs into the foreign language classes that allows them to do? Because it sounds like this is doing additional work outside of their normal classwork. Or is it related to their major at all? Or
It's funny that you mentioned foreign languages, and because we're getting rid of all of those just a little bit at a time in favor of more of a cultural kind of global competency kind of thing. We are not exactly sure yet, because my suggestion was to take existing classes and use our general education. So, and I talked to Louisville too. So I go up to University of Louisville every once in a while and work with Diane and Faye. And I guess now somebody new will be there. It's close. So I go talk to them, and it gives me a chance to go to a vegan restaurant because we don't have any here, but that's beside the point. And Louisville always pays. And I love that. Since I went to school there, that would give me some of my tuition money back. But, well, we're kind of looking at, and that's why I want to talk to KCTC, KCTCS a little bit, the KCTC schools, is that can we use our general education and pick courses that have diversity in that? How would that look? We have a lot of them. I'm not exactly sure, because we have gender and women's studies, we have African American studies, we have some of these classes. We have general classes in diversity, equity, inclusion, and global literacy, and cultural diversity. We have all these things that we could use, but how are they universally in the state of Kentucky? So that would be more what we were thinking, is we would pull courses that already exist into a package. And if the students take that package, then they would get that credential. So I'm also thinking too, that part of it, we have a swiper system like most people do. So if you go to an event, you can swipe, is that we would take extracurricular things and then all would put together into this like certificate, but not a certificate for credit, but for micro-credentialing. So that's but one of the girls that I'm working with thinks that, she said, I think that it might be a good idea if it was something that was outside of the classes. So we're really still in conversation about whether that's a good idea or not. So she was thinking that maybe what we would do is do modules like we did for the Inclusive Teaching Academy. If the students want to do it, they would go online and do it. So we're still out to lunch. The thing that wouldn't work to me is for a 2+2. It's like, if we have our own internal modules, it will work okay for the last 2, but what about the first 6 hours? So we could do the first 6 hours as classes you pull out of general education, and then the rest of it but it's going to take some synchronistic dancing, I think, with the doing it for students, because we have people that transfer in so much. We might have somebody from Louisville that'll come down that's in a 4-year. We just need to make it seamless. So I hope that answered your question, and it probably answered it more than you were asking, but.
No. It does 100%. And one of the reasons I ask is, so I'm the president of the Japan America Society. So we have a lot of students in our offices located in Frankfurt in the Kentucky Chamber Building. So of course, we're surrounded by University of Louisville, Kentucky State, UK. So we get a lot of intern students that do internships for us. And 9 out of 10 times I work it with a professor that they're doing it for credit, and they'll get 3 credits or 4 credits, depending on the amount of time that they work with us. And then that professor writes the kind of almost like the requirement for what they need to do from those students. So I'll have some of my interns that have to do a weekly journal that they submit to the professor of saying, here's what we're doing, here's what I'm learning. A lot of those have to do because they're interested in the Japanese world, or they're wanting to work in the diplomatic field, or they're from the Patterson School, or they're wanting to get introduction to one of our Japanese companies. And at Western, we have a lot of Japanese companies there that we're wanting to work with in placing Western Kentucky students from different varieties of majors, from engineering to language students and this and that, into our Japanese workforce or our Japanese companies. And our goal is culture related activities. So that's what I was kind of asking, if you guys had thought about the possibility of like internships, and how, for us, it's been very beneficial on both sides. So we're kind of already doing it. But yeah, and maybe that's a conversation I can have with Dawn with some of our programs like at UK, that maybe they should apply, because if they're placing students in the international world, that's doing what you guys are wanting to accomplish. They just haven't had anything attached to it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things maybe, and we have thought about this too, is giving people different options for what they want to do with that last part. So the first part being more foundational, so the first 6 hours, and then and that would be awareness and acceptance, and then acknowledgement and action would be at the end. It may be a study abroad. I don't ever want anybody to feel like they're left out because they can't do an internship because they have a job and a family to take care of, or they can't do a study abroad because they can't afford it or whatever. But I mean, so what are some options that people could have? But they may be able to go to some things that we have here on campus. A guest speaker that comes in and nationally known or something like that. So yeah, options would, I mean, I think internships are great. They're major tied too, rather than just general education tied in that sense. So that's another question too. Do we want the first 6 hours to be general education and then the last to be tied to your major? Or, but then a lot of us have people that don't declare their major or they switch, So what are all of these factors? There are so many factors. If we were going to do a factor analysis here, we'd have 50 pages worth of different scales of things that can happen. So I don't know, Dawn, it might be a time for us to maybe have another conversation with the DEI reps across the state about what do we do with the student side. I think they've got a good training program for the staff side. We decided to do something on our own, which is really similar to what they're doing. And we may even incorporate you all some to come down and do those things. And we got the faculty side down, but the students are a little more complicated because there's so many things that are going on with the students, and there's so many different kinds of students and non-traditional students and all of these things that, we probably need to think about.
Well, and I think also, and it's hard, is to define what cultural is, because a lot of times we think of that outside culture, international world, but within the United States and even within Kentucky itself, it's regionally different culturally. So I'm from Eastern Kentucky originally, and I went to the UK in the late 80s. We attended a Appalachian class just for Appalachian students, because our culture and things were so different, was to give us an introduction to the outside world of Eastern Kentucky. So that was a cultural related, activity. So for me, as an outsider, as an American, as a Kentucky, coming to a large university that was culturally different, I could have got maybe 6 hours certification just because I was from Appalachia. So it's just kind of also identifying all the cultural groups that we want to include in that. That's just a comment or a suggestion.
Yeah, we talk about, there's the NSC, the National Student Exchange. We've talked about that some, is that, trust me, I spent the night in Iowa City and got up the next day and tried to pump gas, and I couldn't figure out why they had all these choices. Because of their sustainability, they have gas that's different. And I mean, so can you imagine a student from Eastern Kentucky spending a semester at NYU or something? I mean, that to me, that's an issue. So I think that we could probably have a lot of different ways of looking at this. But to boil down to how it gets communicated across the state is going to be interesting. But I think we've talked about that a lot. It's like, I don't know what to do with the students. That's why we saved them to last, because it was the hardest. But I think we can do this. It's just going to take some coordination among us all, since we have so much transfer going along. I don't want somebody to start at WKU and go to Louisville and Louisville not have anything, and then they've lost their way. Either that, or we could have some sort of state way to figure out the last part. And I don't know. It's just going to take some conversations.
Are there any other questions for Molly? And I'm noticing that my screen is frozen, so I don't know. Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Any other questions for Molly or comments? Thank you so much, Molly. Of course, I'm very proud of the fact that Western Kentucky University was the first, and it's always great to hear about these programs.
Yeah. I thank you, Elaine. Elaine and I go way back. When she was our mayor, she was my BFF. All right. If y'all don't need me
We did
anymore,
some
I'm
fun
out of here.
things.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good one. You all should have received a list of the proposed meeting times, dates, and times for 2023, for the 2022-2023 year. And if everyone could make sure that your video is on and your microphones are on, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the meetings, which are October 24th, 2022, January 23rd, 2023, April 24th, 2023, and June 26th, 2023, fourth Monday of the month. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting dates as stated.
We've got a motion by Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Robert Croft. Are there any comments, any questions, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign? Those are approved. One of the things that I did want to ask is, prior to the pandemic, CEO meetings were held in person at various campuses, and campus representatives would give a presentation highlighting their DEI work. As we go forward, would you all be interested in bringing that back? Should we continue to conduct the meetings virtually, or should we consider some kind of a hybrid where you, if you can attend the actual business meeting personally, that's wonderful, and we would incorporate those visits, or if not, you can log in via Zoom. So I would open this for discussion.
I'll make a comment. Being, I don't know, one of the longer ones on the committee, it before is so beneficial, not just to meet in person, but to go to the universities and the different colleges, because one, it gave the advantage of the school to kind of sort of not show off, but kind of share all the successes that they were doing. And they were always excited for us to come to their campuses, but it also gave us a better understanding to see the campus. And to me, it was just a huge benefit. I miss it. So I recommend that we go back in person and then have the at different universities.
This is
Thank
Robert.
you, David. Are there any other-
Hi, this is
Yeah,
Rochelle
Robert?
Brown. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Hello,
go ahead,
Rochelle.
Rochelle.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think in person sounds great. I would just ask for a hybrid option. It would be prohibitive for me to come in person sometimes. So I think a hybrid option would be optimal.
Yeah, this is Robert Croft. I would agree with Rochelle. I do think, having been someone who's been on the campuses, that it's incredibly beneficial, but I currently live across the country, so it would not always be, I would not always be available to attend in person. So a hybrid option would be, would allow me to participate more.
Don, according to, I don't know, with bylaws or requirements, I remember like when we used to meet, were we allowed to call in like on conference calls and stuff? Was that accepted? And is that going to continue to be okay for us to do that? I agree. I think it should be hybrid. So I'll make sure
Yes.
it's okay with the rules.
If I remember correctly, we had the last couple of times that we did, we had options for individuals, and based on the way we are now, I think hybrid going forward, at least for a little while, is probably the best for us. I know that to your point, some of the institutions have been asking and requesting for us to come and see if we could visit like we had before. So we wanted to make sure we put that out there. So I think going forward, we still probably could do that, as long as we're doing what we're doing now and making sure that those that are in person and those that are virtual are sharing their screen so we can see them. I think, and if I'm not mistaken, Chair Walker, that is something that the actual CPE board can do, as well as work in some hybrid fashion. So if we could follow suit based on the larger board itself.
Yes, we did have a hybrid meeting last time. And again, just want to remind everyone, if you could make sure you can be seen, it's really important for us in the recording and for all of the legal documentation to ensure that they can show that we have our members present. But it sounds as though a hybrid option is something that would be preferred by most of the members. Is there any other discussion?
I would just say that if there are particular campuses that you all are interested in, we try to make sure that we hit both KCTCS and our 4 years. So if there is something that an institution that you're looking at specifically, just let me know or let Chair Walker know. And then we only have 4 meetings throughout the year. So of course we couldn't do everything, but we'll reach out to see availability at the campus levels, and then we'll schedule accordingly.
And have you had schools, you said you had schools that have requested?
Yes. One of
Maybe
them,
we can decide from those, so.
One of them is Murray State University. Wants to come in, it's far away, but wants to come in and show off and share what they've been doing, as you said. And then I just spoke, and the University of Louisville was asking about it as well. So those are the 2 that have recently asked. So.
And those before you guys pay our mileage, so, in our hotels, so it's not an expense to us to go.
Yes, we would reimburse you for your travel.
Well, given the DEI evaluation, it may be intriguing to go and visit Murray and talk with them personally about the process and see what they want to present to us.
So I can reach
Is there
out to
any
them
other
and see
discussion?
if there's some availability, and then I'll let you know. I'll see if they're available, in the next couple of meetings. Oh, and I will say that for the
Thank you
April
very
meeting, since it is the evaluation of the reports, we have typically met in Frankfurt for that one in person, because that's just so much. We don't have time to go through all of the evaluation reports and do a kind of campus highlight session as well, because it's a long meeting.
Understood. Are there any other questions or comments about this proposal or any other business that should be brought before the committee? If not, again, if I would have everyone unmute their microphones and turn on their videos, I will entertain a motion and a second to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn. This is David.
I'll second the motion to adjourn. Kelly.
David. Thank you very much. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we will hopefully see all of you October 24th, 2022. Appreciate your time and effort.
Thank you.
And thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Offit.
Aye.
Aye.
Bye-bye.